Well, Gen Z believe they can and will own homes. The problem is it's not necessarily grounded in reality. Maybe they haven't figured out what we have on this podcast. Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates, and you're listening to the largest and fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. We're in the second half of March 2022, and so today we're going to give you guys a mid-month update. Where do we stand at this critical junction in the Toronto real estate market? And we're going to answer the question, will the Gen Z generation ever be able to afford and own a home or a property in Toronto? But we're excited because this week is the week of St. Patrick's Day. We're having lots of fun and during March break. And you got to hand it to leprechauns because they can't reach it. Sorry. I wanted to lead with a joke about leprechauns, but came up short. Ooh, there we go. We like to have some fun on the show as we talk about our favorite subject, Toronto real estate. As a broker and investor myself, I want to know what's going on in our market and share those details, that info, and my thoughts with friends just like you. If you could, please support the show. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, whatever it takes. And I really appreciate you, friends. I appreciate you being here on an ongoing basis and supporting our show. We put a lot of effort and work into bringing you guys the best. And I respect and really appreciate the comments that I get in DMs from you guys all the time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But let's jump right into it. Enough getting into this smushy stuff. We're going to talk about what's happened so far in the first half of March. Yes, Treb hasn't released its stats, but that doesn't mean we don't have data, some information on what the first half of March has looked like. And we're going to start with this article to refresh where we've come as we look through February. And why not start with featuring a city? This article, BlogTO, is called "Home Prices in this Ontario City Have Nearly Doubled Since the Pandemic Hit." And apart from Toronto, you probably feel like that's probably my city. Anyways, every city feels this way, but we're going to highlight this particular one. Imagine buying your own detached house, a big one with multiple bedrooms, a backyard, and possibly a nice lakefront view for less than $400,000. Not too bad, right? And then selling it only months later, a year later, and nearly doubling the price. The average price of all homes across the city of Windsor in February of 2020 was $386,000, according to the Windsor-Essex County Association. Well, in February 2022, the same figure was $704,000, representing an increase in average home prices of roughly 82%. Year over year, the same data set shows an increase of about 45%. Not too shabby over a couple years to get almost a doubling that's happening, right? Windsor has done almost as good as Ireland. Home prices out in Ireland, they're doubling too. But this is a story, right? People are running away. We got this out-migration that has happened from Toronto since the start of COVID. With interest rates expected to rise, it's unclear if Windsor will be able to sustain its meteoric growth. According to Remax, this will likely depend on interprovincial migration rates. And so the question really comes down to you. And what do you think is going to happen? Do you think people will come back, or do you think people will continue to disperse? People fled during the pandemic, and not just within our province, but out of our province as well. StatsCan reports that Ontario experienced the largest population decline in the second quarter of 2021, the most significant in the province since the early 80s. With almost 12,000 residents leaving the region. From July 2020 to July 2021, StatsCan figures reveal that nearly 85,000 Ontario residents relocated to other regions. It's no wonder areas like Windsor have done well. This compares to 72,000 the previous year. During this time frame, just over 18,000 Ontarians left for more affordable Maritimes, compared to 14,900 the year before. So this ever-increasing disbursement of people from Toronto and from Ontario leaving the province, this has been the story. This has been the story so far. But do you think that will continue to happen? Invest your dollars accordingly. But the cost of entry level as we see it right now, those entry-level homes are set to rise. This is already happening, as the Global News likes to call the year of the condo. On Tuesday, CREA, which is often delayed from the Toronto Real Estate Board, released the national sales figures for February, showing month-to-month growth in the number of units sold from January, but an overall decline of 8% from the same month a year earlier. While overall transactions dipped, which we've been kind of reporting and sharing with you, we knew this was happening. Last year was a record year. At the same time, apartment-style units in major markets largely saw an uptick in sales last month. believe it or not. An outlier is in these apartment style units compared to February of 2021, according to figures that Korea prepared for Global News. And what I want to highlight here, apart from Toronto, is this seems to be a trend common among major Canadian cities. It's not just a Toronto thing. It's a Canadian thing. In fact, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would expect it's probably even outside of Canada as well. But Greater Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Hamilton, Burlington all saw apartment sales jump both year to year and month to month. Though the Greater Toronto Area saw a modest year-over-year decline in this segment, apartment unit sales in the region jumped 38% month to month. Is this just a matter of it being the spring market happening in February, as I tend to think it could be? Or is this something more? But even if it hasn't been just a crazy influx in Toronto, what's interesting to me is that this trend that we've experienced during the pandemic seems to be at least up against the competition of in-migration, moving of people back towards the city. Rob Kavchich, senior economist of BMO Capital Markets, tells Global News that the condo market, while never reversing in value, saw growth stagnate, he calls it, compared to single and semi-detached property classes over much of the pandemic. We've watched these low-rise houses continue to take off, and condos kind of got left behind. Well, this is their moment. He says the past 6 to 12 months have seen activity picking back up. However, especially in areas such as Toronto and Vancouver, quote, there is a shift in demand back into the big cities, he says. And why not? The move back makes sense. Here's some reasons why. Condos saw less price growth appreciation than their residential class counterparts. Those who bought single detached homes outside the GTA are finding the value of their homes outpace condos in Toronto. So you might say, why would you want to invest in an area that hasn't kept up in price? Well, because that puts them in a strong position to put their money back into Toronto condos if they want to move back into the city. This idea of the ability to move back in, right? When we're comparing, often it's a very good investment strategy to look at a market that is the cheapest house on the nice street, the cheapest area in a nice area, and cheapest city in a nice region. This concept continues, and it's worked for investors for years and years. Well, with that logic in mind, we're speaking about condos. And with interest rates on the rise, they're actually safer. Rising interest rates will hit the condo market last, as it remained the most affordable option for aspiring home buyers looking to get into the market before they're fully priced out. With the market on edge, we need all the luck we can get these days. And at the end of the year, I think condo owners will have the last laugh, which reminds me, do you know why a leprechaun laughs when he runs through a field? Because the grass tickles his Lucky Charms. I'm sorry, that one was inappropriate, right? It's like a Lucky Charms evil twin. Tragically malicious. One question, and we talked about this on our last podcast, but we're starting to get some more clarity on the actual impact as things unravel out in Ukraine. The question is, will the war in Ukraine affect or change the real estate market locally at all? Well, Bank of Montreal senior economist Sal Guattieri, I don't know how to pronounce that name, is watching the impact of the Russian-Ukraine war of what he labels Canada's manic housing market. It's a Globe and Mail article, by the way. The war is unlikely to juice the market the way previous crises, such as the 2014 oil price crash and 2020 pandemic have, partly because those events triggered interest rate cuts, he points out. That's the difference. We're not cutting interest rates. We're actually rising interest rates. Canada's housing market faces its biggest test since rate hikes and mortgage rules changes in 2017. Job growth, though, and immigration will provide a cushion. So we have this balance that seems to be happening. Russia's war on Ukraine is roiling financial markets with a limited spillover into real estate so far. It'll be interesting to see if that changes. There seems to be more of an impact in the financial markets than there is in the real estate market. And the argument here is because interest rates are on the rise and inflation is through the roof, as we knew was coming as well. So Narcity.com had this other article. According to a new report they documented from Move Smartly, who is an authority on the Toronto real estate market, they say the city is showing early signs of a decline. Maybe things are changing. Maybe our luck is changing. It's a decline due to fewer buyers viewing homes and a decline in the number of offers sellers are receiving. Right? There's this kind of imbalance of information that's playing out. We'll see here. By mid-February, we all started to see early signs of this trend, and we felt the market was likely going to cool down earlier than we originally thought. That has been the articles that we've been sharing with you and reporting on. I have absolutely been skeptical. I am still skeptical because it's the spring. An increase in activity, an increase in number of listings is not unusual in the spring. And to say that it is would be absolutely ignorant. We have to be careful not to use the word trend. Are prices going to stabilize by the end of the year? I think you'd be crazy to say that they won't. I think that's obvious. But when will that happen? Has it already begun? I don't know. I'm not convinced. And we'll get to why in a minute. But another encouraging trend for homebuyers is the increase in homes that failed to sell on their offer night. If you are holding offers back and you're waiting until the day of, unless you get a bully offer, which could actually work out in your favor right now, you might find that there's not enough people competing. In February, roughly 5% of homes with offer nights failed to sell, forcing them to increase their asking prices. More of them are not working. But you would think that the seller would notice that there's low activity given that it's such a hot seller's market and this change that's happening. As Move Smartly calls, the information is asymmetric. And I think that this is a really good point. If you're in the real estate market or you're considering listing your property, listen up, because sellers know how many people have viewed their homes, but buyers don't. So buyers making preemptive offers, you aggressive buyers out there, are bidding with the assumption that the home is getting a lot of showings and will receive 10 or more offers on offer presentation night. You don't realize, because you don't listen to our show, that that might not be the case. The increase in winning preemptive offers is partly why the share of homes selling for over asking have increased this month. We see homes selling over asking still, because of you preemptive offers, potentially. Even though I'm arguing, they say in this article, that these things are actually cooling because the fact that sellers are accepting these offers suggesting they are seeing something on the ground like viewer showings that are making these offers more attracted to them. They're saying, hey, things might be cooling down. Maybe we should act quickly. Maybe we should accept that bully offer after all. But this is how they left off in this article. So while it's still too early for anyone to see any real shift in the Toronto real estate market, if these trends continue, the city could be on the way to a more manageable housing market in 2022. I agree. If we can continue to see this cooling off that we experienced in the latter half of February 2022, we would be in a good position. But is that happening? No doubt. When we look at the listings, the number of listings, homes were sitting longer at the end of February, which is signs of cooling. The 416 active listings with a price change have rose pretty fast as well. Well, but we need to take a step forward because now we have hindsight of the first half of March. Were we right? I think it's too early to call that we were right, but definitely I think the information that came out from reporting in February was mildly overstated, and the market might not be cooling so quickly. Not to say it won't cool, but I do, as I mentioned, I do still tend to think that we might still see a little bit of a runway. Prices will start to slow down, but I don't think you're going to be seeing any additional cooling or prices coming down. And a big play of that now is coming, that we're coming to terms with, is the months of inventory. Specifically, when it comes to looking at, believe it or not, the freehold, there was a big drop off in listings that took place because of March break, which is normal, but we did see more than average come off. And so the months of inventory in the freehold space right now actually took a pretty significant dive to the point where it's actually lower than condos. Condos been kind of that golden child for low months of inventory. Well, now months of inventory where it increased slightly in the condo space has actually dropped in the freehold space. Freehold now sitting at 0.83 months of inventory, unbelievably low. And condos almost a mirror image at 0.86 or 89 months of inventory, both sub 1 month of inventory. No doubt we find ourselves, though potentially cooling, in an extremely hot seller's market historically. But the second half, this is why this is a critical junction, critical split fork in the road. The second half of March is going to tell us a lot. It's going to tell us if we've started to see that shift away from what was happening at the end of February, maybe this tightening once again taking place in the month of March, people being okay and having accepted and realized the market isn't going to hell in a handbag because of interest rates. Throwing off my words, man. I'm trying to keep it smooth. Try to keep my words smooth, but I'm not. But either we're in for a smooth market or things are about to get a whole lot shittier, right? It's a fine line. Like making the perfect bean soup. You know, bean soup. I love bean soup. Bean soup is coffee, by the way. To make the perfect Irish bean soup, you need exactly 239 beans. That's the trick, guys, because one more and it would make it too farty. There's my Irish accent for y'all today. Back to the US. Which leads us to the main question on the table this afternoon and this morning. What are the odds of Gen Z ever owning a property? in Toronto or at all across this great nation. We're going to start off, we're going to hit a few articles here looking at this study that took place from the Mustel Group and Sotheby's International Realty Canada. This is a blog TO aspect of this argument and discussion. As of January, it costs an average of $1.2 million. That number rose by 10% pretty quickly to buy a home in the Greater Toronto Area. But according to new survey data, at least a few Gen Zers haven't quite clued in on these rising prices. Are Gen Zs just ignorant? Gen Zs, the new millennials. I'm a millennial. Welcome to the party, right? It's easy to bash on the little guy. But a whopping 36% of Gen Z adults are convinced that they will own a home within 5 years. I'll say that again. Over 1/3 of Gen Zs, young people, just entering their career, believe they're going to buy a house within the next 5 years. That's cute. 28% think they will own a home within 5 to 8 years, another quarter, or another third, while 44% aim to own in the next decade. So within the next decade, almost half, 44%, believe that they're going to be able to own a home. Very cute. Very, very cute. Well, Gen Z believe they can and will own homes. The problem is it's not necessarily grounded in reality. Maybe they haven't figured out what we have on this podcast. Of those surveyed, 13% of Toronto Gen Zs actually think they'll be able to purchase a home for less than $350,000, which is honestly, they say, one of the most adorable things I've ever heard. An even larger share, 23%, believe that there's a home for them priced between $350,000 to $500,000. Are you serious? 1 in 5 of you think you can buy a house for under $500,000? That's cute. Well, another 29% of respondents were a bit closer to reality, anticipating spending from $500,000 to $750,000 on their first home, the highest end of which would put them in the price range of the average Toronto condo. There it is, guys. And that's why that is the opportunity right now. I think everyone's going to be fighting for that space, but also still very cute. You think you're going to be buying much for $750,000 in the GTA. Good luck, my friend. But there are Gen Zs who will pull it off creatively. There seems to be this kind of change in temperature, and I respect it because I believe as young people, if you're not in the real estate market, you need to be creative. So I love to hear that this is becoming a common understanding among young people. 24% of Canadian Gen Zers expect to co-own their first home with family. An additional 13% expect to co-own with friends or others who are not family. So people are willing to work together, whether they choose to, I think is probably the case here, or they're forced to. They might end up having to co-own in order to apply for that mortgage. It seems to be more the case. People are willing to partner up with friends and family to make it happen. So how, as a Gen Z, listen up, how do Gen Zs plan to buy a place? I guess that's a question for you guys as well. How do you plan to buy a place? Here are some of the findings of the survey. 67% report that personal savings will be the primary source of funds for their down payment. That really scares me in a lot of ways. And past podcasts, if you followed, it's a tough go, man. It is a tough go. Things are rising faster than personal savings are rising. I'll just put it that way to keep it light. But that is an honest belief. They want to, and kudos to them, right? 2/3 want to actually, with their hard-earned money and personal savings, buy a property. That's noble. That's noble. 25% expect to receive a financial gift from their family for their down payment, which kind of lines up with what we're seeing. And 16% will have support of family inheritance for this purpose. So family money, also a huge opportunity for few, but some Gen Zs and millennials. 24% expect to rely on a loan from a financial institution other than a mortgage. Not quite sure what that means. Are we going private here? What are we doing? What are we doing? I don't know. Maybe they're looking to, at some point, decide to use the incentive program that nobody really even knows exists at this point because it's completely ignored. But maybe that's what they're talking about. The most common measure taken to save for a first home is seeking a full-time job with a higher salary. So I just got in the workforce, but I'm planning on getting a better job. Good thing the workforce is working out for you. But they cited by 51% of people said that. So there is very much a reliance on this job market, the security that people have. It needs to continue to improve. Imagine how devastating that would be for young families that are relying on that as their primary source of saving for a home. But this was followed by reducing personal spending, 42%. A lot of people are starting to cut back Our economy needs the spending to happen. Could this be an issue that we experience throughout our economy? And maybe we don't have jobs available for these young people because they're not willing to spend all this real estate stuff. It has a massive impact on GDP, but it has a massive impact on our overall economy and the progress that people can make with them and their young families. And they also said, or earning extra income with a second job. 41% once said that, 41%. So many young people are willing to work hard, save money. A lot of those values that you've hoped you've instilled in your kids have obviously come through. The problem is they spent so much time learning about financial savings and strategy that they lost their sense of what is a real estate price. They've ignored that aspect. So that's where you got to kick in and give them all the money that you have, if you have it. However, you slice it. Young people want real estate. That's the lesson here, guys. 83% agree that home ownership will play a major role in their ability to achieve a financially stable retirement. There goes my mic, throwing it out the side. Getting a little too excited here. Hope you guys are as well. But with almost 70% wanting to do it on their own, it's going to be an uphill battle. Time to start cutting expenses, right? Bye-bye Irish babysitter. Can't afford that Nanny McPhee. So who do we blame? Because it's easy to blame. We're all looking for, if we've got victims, we know who the victims are in this case. Who are the abusers? Who are the victimizers? The ones that are out there hurting our young folk. Can we blame the boomers? Here's where we go with this. Toronto City News. With baby boomers having an increasingly difficult time downsizing their homes, a new emerging factor may be having an impact on the price and availability of housing. Quote, we aren't seeing the generational turnover of homes that I think many municipal planners have forecasted over the last 10 to 15 years. Very much our real estate industry relies on move up and then downsize type of environment. Well, what happens when the downsizing isn't happening and there becomes this bottleneck, this level of competition, which we're seeing absolutely play out. But here are some reasons why you maybe shouldn't blame the baby boomers. And here's why they're not moving. Number one, municipalities have a strong track record for planning and approving land developments in the form of condo skyscrapers or family-oriented neighborhoods, or detached homes, but very little in between, as many have called the missing middle. What we are building, the number of buildings seems to be pretty good. In fact, it's actually growing, believe it or not. But what they're building is not accurate. It's not what's needed. Today's retirees as well are considered healthier, right, than previous generations, and they aren't yet ready to move into retirement communities. Another reason why you're going to stay put. Maybe we just make them sicker. That's not the solution. Mature adults who are finding themselves trapped by slim pickings in the hot market. Baby boomers are struggling too. I have clients that are looking for properties, and even when you're buying it in cash with the money from your downsize, man, you think it's competitive for it just reminds you how difficult it is for young people who do rely on assistance with financing, because the challenge for people who have the cash is also very cutthroat. Absolutely. Wow. With travel options being diminished over the last 2 years due to COVID-19 restrictions, baby boomers have started to renovate their current homes to enjoy spending time at home. COVID has kind of led people to not be so quick to travel or to leave or to run away, but why not just enjoy what you have? We'll buckle down and we'll enjoy our time at home. Not to mention, senior centers are not looking too fun these days. Well, then if we can't blame boomers, which is often a blame, and I do blame boomers in some capacity, but we're going to give them off. We're going to let them off today. What about policymakers? Is it policymakers that are screwing the pooch here? That's terrible terminology. Screwing up the real estate market. BlogTO.com, a shocking amount of Toronto homes sit empty as other cities see low vacancy. This balance of vacancy and vacant units. A 10-year analysis of StatsCan. StatsCan seems to be figuring it out now. StatsCan has had ways, and they got these very creative ways of figuring this out, but they're now starting to publish and share what that empty homes looks like, because we've been in the dark in a lot of ways. Well, they're covering vacancy rates and empty homes in 150 cities across the country. From Toronto real estate experts, Point 2 reveals some surprising stats about Toronto and other Ontario markets. First off, we see vacancies are dropping, but homes are empty. So according to the study, there are approximately 1.3 million unoccupied homes nationwide, but vacancy fell over the period of time analyzed in 87 of the 150 cities by population. So the majority of cities see this kind of fall of vacancy as well. You'd think with a falling vacancy, you got this kind of trend of people just leaving them empty, but we need that housing. Well, this marks the first time that vacancies are on the decline in 20 years. Now more than ever, we need to have these units filled. We can't afford to leave them empty. So back to the question, we've seen success in policies made out in Vancouver. Should Toronto be seriously looking at a vacant home tax, and what would that look like? Something should maybe be done. So maybe policymakers are to blame and should be held on the hook. And what we do see is city policies have been working, even in Toronto. When we look at Airbnb, which in many would argue has been a bit of a failure, in fact, it's had its successes. It's been 5 years since Toronto passed a bylaw regulating short-term rental market, and approximately 42% of short-term listings have transitioned back to traditional rental markets, which demonstrates, again, it's working. So maybe it's time that we double down. The city thinks so. Now, after many false starts, the city says it is finally prepping to unleash an enforcement blitz with a budget plan that seeks to boost its enforcement team from 5 staff to 12. Quote, we have transitioned from an education phase to more direct enforcement. Time to start attacking those Airbnbs. This was from Carlton Grant, Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards. But the question remains, what more can be done to ensure housing is protected for the next generation? And that's pretty much where we're headed today. Leave that comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. We're always looking for ideas. We have a very wide reach in the real estate community, especially among investors. And so this is a good platform to have that dialogue. Please contribute. Please share. And happy St. Patrick's Day week. I know we're kind of behind St. Patrick's Day, but we're excited. To all my Irish friends, my fellow Irish friends, believe it or not, we actually have Irish in our bloodline here at the Watson residence. I've got that frog DNA. That's right. Part English, part Irish, and a tadpole. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, share this episode on Instagram if you have learned some stuff. You can tag us at Watson Estates. And please, for our dedicated listeners out there, please take a minute to leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. I will see you guys again soon. Take care and keep it real.